So I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should keep Jameis Winston. I know it's honestly probably one of the more controversial things that's being talked about right now is what should Tampa Bay do with Jameis Winston? I mean, quite frankly, there's people that believe Winston is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and there's people that believe that he is completely standing in the way of Tampa Bay's chance for success. And honestly, at times, both are the case. I mean, he's absolutely played like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, honestly, when he's on, he's playing like the best quarterback in the NFL, and when he's off, he's playing like the worst quarterback in the NFL. It's the conundrum that is Jameis Winston. But I think that there's several reasons why I think Tampa Bay should stick with Winston, even if it's just a franchise tag for 1 year to give him a little bit longer before they make their final decision. I do think they should keep him, and let's just get into the breakdowns. First, I'm going to start off with some good plays. I will then show some bad plays to fully illustrate my point of why I do think they should keep him, but what the risks are of keeping him. But anyways, let's just start things off with this play. It's a cover 2 zone that Atlanta is in, and Chris Godwin is going to be running that route right there, which as you see, it will get into a gap in coverage in that middle of the field area. And so there will be a window for Winston to potentially try to make this throw right when the ball is snapped. However, that window is going to close up a lot right when the ball is snapped because as you see, a linebacker does a great job of staying with Godwin and trying to close that window as much as possible. It's just a good read, realizing what they're trying to do, taking away the gap in coverage, really a smart heads-up play by Atlanta. And also, if you look at that safety who is further deep, he is now breaking down. He saw the ball is going in that direction, so he's going to try to break down and make a play, even though Tampa Bay did have a receiver up in that direction trying to keep him as close to the sideline as possible. It didn't work out too well, so now there is basically a mailbox for Winston to try to fit this ball through, and of course, because he's Winston, he's going to throw it there anyways. But look at this throw. I mean, that's just exactly where you want it to be, which allows Godwin to make the catch. Since the safety took an aggressive angle, he was not able to make the tackle, which allowed Godwin to get not just a huge gain, but get all the way into the end zone for a touchdown. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I think Jameis Winston is honestly only one of 2 quarterbacks who can make that throw with some consistency. Obviously, every quarterback in the NFL can make that throw once in a blue moon, but if we're talking 7 out of 10 times, I think only Winston and Mahomes can actually make that throw 7 out of 10 times at this point in their career. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, but really, I mean, a throw deep down the field with that kind of accuracy and that kind of power under it, it's so difficult to pull that off, and that's kind of just, again, the raw talent with Jameis Winston. You see that throw, and you're like, how is this guy not tearing up the league like Mahomes is? Of course, then you watch his lowlights and you understand why. But anyways, let's talk about another just fantastic play from him. And this is really going to show what a gunslinger type mentality can do for an offense, especially in today's NFL, where what's going to happen is that it's going to be play action, and then Winston is actually going to roll out to the top half of the screen. And the route he's going to actually want to try to throw this to is going to be O.J. Howard's route right there. Tampa Bay does have 2 other routes that are running deep, but that's mostly just to get Houston players out of position. Really, he wants to hit O.J. Howard. That's what this play is designed to have happen. However, after the ball is snapped, you're going to notice that Howard is just not open right here, so Winston can't really make that throw. But there is another situation going on, and it's down there. You see that there is a one-on-one matchup. Now, the good news for Tampa Bay in that situation is that it's Ishmael Hyman going up against a defensive back, and the reason why that's a good news is because it's a tight end going up against a defensive back. You have a clear size advantage, so you'd think that would be a good situation for Tampa Bay. The problem is that this is literally Hyman's first game in the NFL. He is by far not quite a star by any means. He's really a practice squad guy. So the fact that Winston is going to have so much faith in a guy who he probably just met earlier today, it kind of just goes to show his gunslinger mentality. But this can have some huge impacts because he does throw it over there. Hyman is able to outbox his assigned man, and they get the ball inside the 5-yard line, and they were able to tie the game at the end of the first half. Now, admittedly, the whole reason why they even lost that game was because Winston threw 4 interceptions. The whole reason why they got down so much in the first half was because Winston threw a couple interceptions early on. So there obviously are some downsides, but the gunslinger mentality, we tend to just talk about the downsides. It has its good sides too. But the real reason, maybe honestly, this is the key positive when talking about Jameis Winston, is the way he'll just pick apart simple base coverages. You cannot run one or two coverages all game against Winston. He will just pick you apart. And you look at the games where he put up big statistical numbers, it's almost always with defenses not really getting too creative. Like on this play, it's going to be a cover 3 zone. He has a receiver running that route right there. It'll kind of get into a gap in coverage. And take a look at what happens right when the ball is snapped. You see that there is an opening, but there's not much of an opening. I mean, yes, he has a player who is kind of open, and if this was a Jerome where you could just drop it from straight above, he would be wide open, but that's obviously not the way football works. You see Indianapolis has a player right over there who has read this situation and is going to try to run over and knock the ball away, and honestly, this is how interceptions happen for a lot of players. It really is. But Winston puts so much zip on that ball and gets it there so quickly and accurately that Perriman makes the catch, gets inside the 40, and they get a big gain. And honestly, he does that so much against zone coverage. He really is he's a zone coverage killer. He honestly is. I mean, the downside is every now and then he will miss a throw, and that can result in some interceptions, but for the most part, against zone coverage, he will just pick you apart, and you really do almost have to play man, but then the problem becomes who is going to play man coverage against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I feel like way more often than not, against zone coverage, he does pick a team apart, but there are some times when it backfires, and basically my biggest problem with Winston is his post-snap reading ability. It often gets talked about his low football IQ, but honestly, I don't know if I necessarily see it that way. I think it's more so his poor post-snap reading ability. He's actually great at reading plays pre-snap, but post-snap is where he struggles. It's very interesting. I don't know if any player has been quite like Winston in that regard, where they're great at reading plays pre-snap, but they suck at reading plays post-snap, and that's kind of how Winston is. Like on this play, it's going to be same coverage, cover 3 zone, and that's going to be Mike Evans' route. So Winston is saying, okay, great, perfect, I'm great in these situations, Mike Evans is great in these situations, let's make a play happen. But after the play develops, one interesting thing is that the Atlanta player is going to kind of read what's going on, and he's going to try to just jump in front of this route. So typically at this point, you wouldn't make a throw in this direction if you were just looking at it now, but Winston just doesn't make this decision quick enough. Pre-snap, he was going to throw it to Evans, so post-snap, he still throws it to Evans, and the ball gets picked off. And that's kind of what happens to Winston a lot. On a lot of his interceptions, it is plays like that where on the base coverage, he sees it and says, okay, this route will work against this coverage. I know I can make this throw. But if someone does something different, that's where he struggles. So for example, if you were to play just like a typical cover 3 zone for most of the game against Winston, he probably would pick you apart. I mean, that's what he was able to do against Seattle when he played them. But at the same time, if you maybe played an aggressive cover 3, or if you mix things up a little bit, occasionally have a guy, try to jump a route as opposed to just running the basic coverage, it results in way more interceptions than the average player. Like this play was another one that I thought was very interesting. What's going to happen is that it's going to be man coverage. We know that right off the bat. And what's going to happen for Winston is that that's the receiver he wants to hit. It's a great route against man coverage because it cuts in, so there is going to be an easier angle for Winston to try to make this throw, and with the cut, that can allow the receiver to get some more separations. But keep in mind, since there's two safeties who are deep, it pretty much gives you an idea that probably one of two things are going to be happening. Either one, it would be a cover 2 man, which is what you see on the screen now, which would actually be a great situation for Tampa Bay. I mean, just looking at it on paper, that route would be wide open outside of the player who is playing man. However, what it could also be is a cover 1 robber, and this would be a much more risky situation because there's now going to be a safety who cuts over to the middle of the field, meaning that this route will only be open for a small sliver of time. And with this looking like it's going to be a cover 2 man, but actually being a cover 1 robber, take a look at what happens right when the ball is snapped. The receiver Winston wants to hit is open, but at this point, Winston probably should look over there and realize that the safety is not only playing the middle of the field, but he's running over to take away the route that Winston wants to throw to. I'm assuming Winston didn't forget that a cover 1 robber is a play that exists in football. That's definitely not what happened. What happened was Winston said, okay, whether this is a cover 1 robber or cover 2, there will be a small sliver where I can make this throw, so I'm just going to make this throw the second my receiver cuts, regardless of what the coverage is. Which isn't a terrible mindset to have going in, but once you realize that there is a safety who is breaking down towards where your player is trying to get to, at a certain point you do have to move off of that and try to find a different receiver to throw to. However, Winston doesn't, which results in an interception. It was nearly a pick six, but it actually it got called back due to a flag. The interception still counted, but the pick six part didn't. However, either way, I mean, without a doubt, it's just one of those. Winston understands what's going on. He figures out what he's going to do, but then once things go wrong, he needs to learn what not to do. I hear a lot of people saying things like, Jameis Winston, he's been in the league for 5 years now. He is what he is, and I just don't agree with that. I mean, for one thing, he's 26, which is definitely, it's always surprising to hear that. You know, it seems like he should be 30 by now. He isn't. He's still very young. So I do think that Winston not only can improve at this, but he will improve to some degree. I think that he absolutely will. But one of the main things that I think that people aren't mentioning as well is just the fact that this was the first year that not just Winston, but the entire Tampa Bay offense was playing in the Bruce Arians system, give or take a couple of players that they brought on who had played in it before. And learning a new system takes some time, and there were tons of plays like this, especially early on in the season, where it's a cover one blitz that the Carolina Panthers are in, and those are the two routes that the two Tampa Bay receivers on the bottom half of the screen will be running. And take a look at what happens right when the ball is snapped. So that's Chris Godwin, and there's some separation. Godwin's about to cut to the bottom half of the screen, and so at this point, Winston is going to say, I'm going to throw it now, let's try to make sure we can time this up perfectly. But the problem with that is Godwin waits way too long to get his head turned around. Also, a little just side thing was that a Carolina Panther just made a great read on that play. You know, the guy who intercepted the ball actually wasn't even in charge of covering Godwin, so that's something just in its own right. But you saw these things happening a lot. There were several interceptions that would happen with a receiver just running a wrong route. And I'm sure some people are going to say, well, yeah, Jackson, but that literally happens with every quarterback in the NFL. Why do we give a pass for Winston when we won't give a pass for everybody else? And that's totally fair, but I do think that one reason why there was maybe more of these for the Bruce Arians system and for Jameis Winston than for other teams was because in the Bruce Arians system, there's a lot of receivers running option routes, which means that basically, based on the coverage, a receiver might run a different route just depending on what they see. And so, because of this now means that more receivers are going to just have cross-ups happen where they run the wrong route, because now sometimes they won't even know what route they're running up until the play starts. That happened on a number of occasions, and when you have a guy like Winston who is going to try to time those perfectly, it's just a combination that will result in interceptions, but less so when you've already played in the system for a year and kind of have those things down. I think Winston has a lot of work that needs to be done, without a doubt. He is far from a finished product, but I don't buy into the he's 26, he's too old to change, because I think he's almost there. I actually thought that his accuracy got a lot better in 2019. I think he probably was as accurate as he's ever been, to be honest. And I also think there's some interesting things that they could do next season. Like, one thing I just thought of that I would totally do if I was a Tampa Bay coach was that I would say, hey, let's start doing some pump fakes, because guys are trying to read you to try to get interceptions, because let's be real, football is a business. You get an interception, that's an extra $1 million on your paycheck. So you're going to try to jump some routes, maybe try to do a pump fake here and there, get guys to be fooled, and then you can get some wide open receivers. I think there's some fun gamesmanship that can happen. And plus, I just think, listen, no matter who you go with, there is going to be a risk. I don't think Tampa Bay is complete enough. I think they're pretty complete at this point. They're close, but I don't think they're complete enough to the point where they can just trade a bunch of assets to get a top pick to try to draft a quarterback. I don't really love any of the quarterbacks that are going to hit the free agency market in the Bruce Arians system. There's guys I really like, such as a Teddy Bridgewater, for example, but he just would not fit this system at all because he doesn't have the big arm that a guy like Winston does. And also, if you watched Winston last season, at least 5 of his interceptions came from O.J. Howard screwing something up. So, you take those out of the equation, you take some of the routes out of the equation, and then Winston maybe just improves and throws 5 less on his own. You could easily be looking at a 17 interception season, which would be a huge difference. I mean, if you can throw for 5,000 yards, over 30 touchdowns, and then just 17 interceptions, that's how you get Drew Brees type numbers, honestly. If you look at him, that's what he would get when he was, not winning MVPs, but when he was in the position where he should have been winning MVPs if his team was better. I'm not going to say he doesn't have his flaws, but at the end of the day, you're going to take a risk no matter who you go with. I think that this is definitely a risk that can absolutely pay huge dividends, And I also think that it's proven by this season that you can win with Winston. Just another thing, I know I keep adding on things at the end of this video. One more thing I feel like I have to mention is the fact that he's also the kind of guy who I could totally see getting hot in January and just sort of having a few great games and finding a way to go on a run and have sort of a Joe Flacco-esque run, if you remember back in 2012 when he did that. Again, my thought on all these kind of things is that if you have a way to improve on a certain position, you should do it no matter what the position, even if it's quarterback. I mean, if Deshaun Watson is available all of a sudden, then yes, Tampa Bay should get Deshaun Watson, but that's not going to happen. I think Winston is their best option, in my opinion, and I think if they do decide to not sign Winston, there'll be plenty of teams that want him. And of course, then there's the whole cap thing. So there's so much to talk about, honestly, but that's just my opinion on Winston as a player. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.